Hi, I'm Karen down in Ripley, and I invite you to join me on a recent, unexpected side trip to Brittany, France during the 80th anniversary of the city of Plélo's liberation celebration and learn why Americans and Bretons celebrate their shared DNA from World War II. A last-minute decision to deliver my father's World War II documents to the city of Plélo, France, opened me up to an amazing experience that has truly changed my life. I ask that you join me so that you too can know and appreciate how we Americans are respected and revered because our ancestors fought to liberate the town of Plélo in August 1944. Bert and I eagerly launched into our trip to England and Europe, only to be quickly disappointed and exhausted by the difficulties of modern-day travel. Our itinerary was to begin with a flight to London, where we would join members of our sister yacht club, the Little Ship. Yacht Club is located on the Thames in London, England, and we would join them for a week-long sailing trip as guests on one of their yachts. We looked forward to joining them on a 20-yacht cruise to ports and yacht clubs along the English Channel. This was to be followed by a visit with old friends in England and a driving trip through Europe before returning to England and flying home. There was also the outside chance that we might try to drive over to Brittany, France, where my father had served in World War II. I hoped to deliver Dad's World War II documents that recorded his participation in the liberation of Plélo. Travel became increasingly difficult, and we decided to cut things short in Europe and head back to visit friends in England before catching the plane home from London. I told Bert that I wasn't prepared to extend the trip. I wasn't sure if Plélo even existed. I had no idea if there was a mayor or a historian. I decided I would do further research once we got home. Bert quietly and without me noticing turned the car toward Plélo. He knew I would be sorry if I didn't check things out for myself. I was thrilled when I realized that Bert was driving me to Plélo. I was glad that we would be traveling most of the day as the countryside was lovely and it would give me time to remember my dad. I wanted to understand why it was important for me to reconnect with my dad in Plélo. I began to reminisce about how my dad and I had first met. At the time, I didn't know what to expect. Dad had been vilified by my family for leaving me and my mom and going to California to make money. Even though he had returned, it wasn't soon enough for my mom. As I was growing up, Mom put my dad down and told me he was crazy and that I was just like him. When I would ask about my dad, my mom would say that I could meet him once I was grown up. In spite of all the negative messages, at 20 years old, I was confident in myself and always up for a new adventure. What could be better than meeting my long-lost father? When I first met my dad, I was an entitled sorority girl, attending West Virginia University. I was pretty, popular, and I expected everything to just keep going my way. In other words, I didn't have a clue who I was or what was about to happen. Even though my dad had not raised me, from the minute we met, we were very close. We understood each other. I was 20 and he was 41 when we met during a visit I made with my mother to see her family in Ohio. After my parents divorced and my mom remarried, I was not permitted to meet my dad until I was an adult. My mom's brother, Uncle Roger, had made the arrangement for us to meet at my great-aunt's house. My mom's mother, Augusta, was also there. When Dad arrived, he made a grand entrance. He drove up in a gold Thunderbird convertible, leaving the door open and bounding up the steps two at a time to the front door. As Dad twirled me around in our first big hug, the whole house started hopping. My mom and great-aunt started giggling. I was beside myself. However, when Grandma saw him, she cussed for the first and only time I ever heard her do so, saying, "Oh, hell, it's Delbert." She then told me, "You don't want to meet him. He's a gambler, a womanizer, a drinker, and a fighter." Grandma's chagrin was quickly overshadowed as Dad's energy charged the house. It was party time. Grandma lived in Minnesota and didn't know that Daddy had ingratiated himself with just about every member of the Rogers family in southern Ohio. He considered Mom's family his family and made regular rounds to visit all the old folks, and they loved him for it. After getting to know my father, I realized that my grandma had been absolutely right. He was many things a Methodist preacher's daughter would not approve of. But oh, he was so much more. He was smart, fun, kind, endearing, protective, and I'll admit it, a little dangerous. You just never knew what was going to happen next. But above all else, Dad loved people. He loved you whether you were young or old, man or woman, rich or poor, and he always made time to tell you a really good story. Dad was always straight with me, and I loved him dearly. Much of his advice may have seemed a little bit inappropriate. He saw the world in war terms and taught me how to defend myself, especially if I was ever arrested. He even gave me weapons and taught me how to use them. There was never a dull moment, because Dad was a talker. He had the gift of gab, and he told me everything about his life. The silly, crazy side of life, and the dark, ugly side too. And that included detailed and horrifying stories of what he had seen and what he had done in the war. I used to hang on to his every word. When his stories reached a fevered pitch and stirred me close to tears or made me angry and ready to fight, I would often say, "Oh, Daddy, I wish I could have been there with you." And he would say, "You were, Karen, Beth. You were there." Burt and I drove through the Brittany countryside, and I began to reminisce about how I had first met my dad and what he'd meant to me. I was more like my adventurous dad than my shy mother and her side of the family. It meant a lot to me to finally belong and no longer feel like a fifth wheel. Dad and I got along great, and I loved hearing his stories. So be sure to join me for the next episode of You Were There, Karen Beth, as I continue to remember my dad's amazing stories as Burt and I were driving through Brittany. I hoped I could learn even more about him during my visit to Plélo. Well, if Plélo even existed. Little did I know that I would soon learn that the major story of his life occurred during his wartime experience. His battle trauma would not only have a profound effect on his life, but also on everyone in his life, and that included me.